The teachings of General Conference are the considerations the Lord would have before us now and in the months ahead.
Our marching orders for each 6 months are found in the General Conference addresses.
For the next 6 months, your conference edition of the Ensign should stand next to your standard works and be referred to frequently.
I encourage you to read the talks once again and to ponder the messages contained therein.
I exhort you to study the messages of this conference frequently, even repeatedly, during the next 6 months.
You're listening to the Conference Talk Podcast, where it's conference weekend every weekend. Each weekend, we discuss talks from the most recent General Conference of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
That is right. We'll share some insights, make some connections, and have a bit of fun as we study the words of the awesome men and women that God has called to direct His church in the latter days. I'm Brett Kane.
And I'm Matthew Watkins, and this episode we are going to be addressing President Oaks, his talk from the October 2024 General Conference, nicely titled Following Christ. And for this episode, Brett, you brought a guest on with us.
Yes, indeed. One of my best friends, Zach, welcome aboard. Thanks for coming back on.
Hey, thanks for having me again.
Perfect. Well, this is a great talk, and I couldn't think of anyone better because, Zach, you've always been a good example of doctrinally sound and such an anchor. And I think that's what President Oaks has always been. He's always been so clear, so concise, and he just is an amazing speaker. There have been a lot of people who have disliked, some of the directness in his talks, but this one was particularly great for me. But I've listened to this talk several times over again, and he begins where he says, "This year, millions have been inspired by the gospel study plan known by the Savior's invitation, 'Come follow me.' Following Christ is not a casual or occasional practice. It is a continuous commitment and a way of life that should guide us at all times and in all places."
What a line that is. That reminds me of President Holland's famous address where he said, "You never check your religion at the door." Maybe they sense this attitude among the members. Our adherence to the gospel should direct and determine every aspect of our life, not just what we think of as the spiritual side.
Something I noticed when I got back from my mission, a change in a lot of the guys. The mission was something they turned on and then turned off when they got back. A lot of the guys that I served with that were kind of like, they had no issues being diligent missionaries. As soon as they got home, they just flipped a switch and they were the same guy they were the day before they left. And it was almost like the mission was just something they put on and then took off. So like you said, with like people on Sunday, it's like you put on your Sunday clothes. Now you're going to follow the rules and be nice and do all that stuff. But as soon as you take them off, you're going to go astray. And so I think it is something people struggle with.
That makes me bristle hearing that. God's not a fan of when we turn our covenants on and off. That leaves us in a worse spiritual state at the end than if we'd never had entered into them.
I don't know. I don't understand how you could do it. I have to be all in or nothing at all. I can't switch back and forth.
So I work in a profession that is dominated by members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in door-to-door sales. And there's a lot of benefit that comes with that. And there is significant challenges also. It's interesting to see the more that I'm with some of my coworkers, how easily they'll slip into using profanity. And it has to be a way of life, like President Oaks is saying, and it has to guide us at all times and in all places. It's not something that we're necessarily always preaching, but it's always apparent in our comportment and our behavior. And everyone should know. That's something I remember hearing a lot about when we hear about church members who go to Israel and they're not allowed to proselytize, but just by virtue of being members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, they're sharing the gospel. And going right along, President Oaks says, "The first step in following Christ is to obey what he defined as the great commandment in the law. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like unto it, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. And there's been a lot of talk about those two commandments lately.
And it's important to note the number. Jesus was asked a specific question. He was asked, what is the great, or in other words, what is the greatest commandment? Number one, singular. And Jesus didn't dodge the question. He answered, he says, the greatest single commandment is love the Lord your God, which means, of course, to follow his commandments. Now, he gives him extra credit, right? He says, oh, by the way, here's the second commandment. But he's very clear in his answer. This one trumps this one. If we ever find ourselves in a situation where we think loving our neighbor as ourselves is going to come in conflict with the first commandment, we always defer to the first commandment. I feel like in society, we get that backwards sometimes.
Have you seen that, Zach, where people conflate or reverse those?
To a certain extent, I feel like I see more nowadays as people say commandments are bad. It's not even mixing up the commandments. They just say, well, isn't telling people what to do kind of mean? That, yeah, it's not even necessarily a reversal of them as much as an abolishment of all commandments as seen as a good thing. And he builds an analogy of a kite, that for a kite to fly higher, you need a string attached to it. As soon as you cut the string thinking, hey, my string is only so long, the kite can only go so high. As soon as you cut the string, the kite would obviously fall straight to the ground. And so the only thing that keeps it flying is that connection to the ground. And he compares that to the commandments, right? I think you see this a lot where a lot of people say, well, you know, I can't drink coffee. I have to not eat on the first Sunday of every month. You know, there's so many rules. I have to wear specific clothing. You know, people complain about these rules and they're like, there's no way God actually cares what clothing you wear and what you're eating. You know, we should just do whatever. Is as soon as people are like, well, you know, the rules are holding me back. Okay, so let's get rid of the rules. It's rare you see someone do better after they kind of live a more lax life or kind of get rid of some of those guiding principles.
Yeah, I see people complain about religious scrupulosity giving them anxiety. So they leave the church, and now they've got anxiety, depression, and a drunk problem. Yeah.
Right. Now they're just addicted to substances and still have the same problems. But hey, they don't have to wear specific clothing and they can drink their bean water.
You just look at it from a parental standpoint, and it's what would our kids do without rules?
Mm-hmm.
You know, if they had no bedtime, did not have to eat their vegetables, did not have to, you know, take a bath, like all these things, it would be pandemonium. Going back again to Elder Holland's talk, the cost and blessings of discipleship from a couple of years ago, they want a God who not only doesn't rock the boat, but won't even row it. The example of the kite is such a good example. We need that tether in order to, you know, to fly.
It also reminded me, this is just like a principle of nature. So I don't know if either of you have much land or have ever tried to like garden at any size.
Oh, I have successfully failed much of gardening, yes.
Yeah,
Exactly. I only have half an acre, but it's more than I've had. Man, keeping the weeds down is hard. There's a book by Joel Salatin. He's a farmer, like a restorative farmer. He's kind of writing about Christian principles in taking care of the land. But he brings up the point that beautiful, bucolic farmland that you drive by only looks that way because of the human intervention. So yeah, basically like a little bit of control and measured work actually builds a more beautiful product. And that's like a law of nature.
Yeah, I just looked up The Marvelous Pigness of Pigs.
Marvelous Pigness of Pigs. It's a good book. It's a weird title, but
Also sounds like maybe a dieting book, but
yeah.
Which is another good example. I mean, you would never look at a top athlete who didn't have some, you know, strict training regime.
he's only fit because he's oppressed.
Yeah.
When I was on my mission, we had this great training that is forever going to impact my life. My mission president gets up there and he writes, I forget whether it's Dr. Combs 59 or 58, you'll have to excuse me, but the Lord is promising all these blessings. And among those, he says, and I will give them commandments, not a few. And our mission president says, yeah, you think about that, elders and sisters. We've got an 82-page white handbook with plenty of commandments in here, and he's promising us more if we're faithful. That doesn't sound like a good deal, you know? And he says, but never forget this. And he wrote on the chalkboard, commandments are the secrets of godliness. He says, Heavenly Father is trying to turn us into beings as he is. We cannot achieve that unless we will follow the instruction manual how to do that. If we look at it with resentment, then we're not learning. We're not showing a desire to progress. He doesn't just give us these rules, say, hey, let me prove your faithfulness to me, jump through this hoop, right? That's not how God works. Everything he gives us is for a reason and for our benefit. And when we resent that, when we ostracize it, we're like all these people who, I loved your farm analogies, that nature will take over. They want to enjoy the fruits of Western civilization without any of the foundation that made it that way.
Societies that have strict norms are almost every instance better off than a lax society. And I was thinking about, the broken window theory, where you ticket the jaywalkers and everything. And Heavenly Father has that principle. He cannot look upon sin with the least degree of allowance. It's like, no, not only are we going to ticket them, we're going to execute the jaywalkers. But
spiritually, eventually, if they're unrepentant, just to be clear.
Yes,
we're going with
exactly.
Sharia law gospel now.
And to be clear for anyone listening, we're not saying you need all laws and all things. And even I think that the Savior himself has kind of had this pattern of leaving more to our own devices to a certain extent with come follow me. It's not like this is the lesson, this is what you learn. It's kind of like, hey, you go find out what you want to learn about this. With ministering, it's been kind of more of an opening of saying, hey, just go be friends with these people. And so to a certain extent, there are these kind of higher laws, and you will be benefited by living them to the fullest. But without any commandments, we'd be better off is just not true.
Here's the thing about those higher laws. We look at them as if they're easier. We look at it as, Christ is relieving the oppressive burden of the law of Moses, 613 rigid commandments about how many steps you can walk. That's not what he was doing. To use President Oak's kite analogy, he's giving us more string, more commandments, more work, right? Whoever thinks that the higher law is easier isn't doing it right? When they changed the For the Strength Youth pamphlet, when they changed to ministering, when they're changing the Come Follow Me program into a church-supported, home-centered, we're like, oh, cool, it's only 2 hours of church. We're looking at the burden side of things and thinking of it as a burden. In reality, saying, look, I'm taking the responsibility and I'm shifting it square onto your shoulders. You are responsible for getting your spiritual nourishment. You're not baby birds waiting to be fed. You are responsible for setting standards in your home and not outsourcing it to the MPAA. And you're responsible for guiding your parents. And we shouldn't have to tell you where your dress line and your tattoo should go or not go in the case of tattoos, right? That's a lot harder. And people who think it's easier are going in there without realizing that commandments are the secrets of godliness.
I've moved around a bit in the last few years since they did Come Follow Me. So I've seen it in a few different wards. Some wards are literally just doing nothing with the youth, since there's no scouting and no direction is nothing. And I think it's to the detriment of some people. And Brett had Wilcox on his podcast who said the same exact thing, Brett Wilcox. And I see the same thing with Come Follow Me. I used to teach the youth. It would be 1 student out of 10 that actually did their Come Follow Me reading. And that's sad, but also what I've seen is the people that do follow the commandments grow so much better. And I feel like it's a testament to this idea that commandments actually help you fly higher.
It seems like there's a lot more that's being missed out on. So I get to substitute seminary all the time and all different age levels. And I'll be impressed at the eagerness of these youth, and they're speaking out, they're raising their hands and they're participating, and they have a lot of faith. But I'm equally surprised at some of the basics that they don't know. I could ask my 9-year-old who the 4 sons of Mosiah were, and she'll name them. And then these 16-year-olds don't know.
That's because their parents can't name them.
Right. Yes, exactly. And it's not just like, know these facts, this trivia, but I think that there are some key indicators and really immersing ourselves in the scriptures. I like what President Oakes, he makes a distinction between temporary and permanent commandments. Like the temporary commandment was to relocate, the saints. And then he says, some permanent commandments have taken considerable time to be generally observed. For example, President Lorenzo Snow's famous sermon on the law of tithing emphasized a commandment given earlier, but not yet generally observed by church members. And that could be the same with the word of wisdom, which wasn't, a strict commandment when it was first revealed.
I am so grateful that he called that out in General Conference. Now, if you read church history, if you read, the Saints volumes, you see that, the church went through some really interesting changes, right? President Brigham Young had everyone rebaptized after they got to the Salt Lake Valley, because he's like, yeah, you guys aren't getting it. We're starting over fresh. Everyone get rebaptized now, right? The word of wisdom wasn't made a commandment until, what was it, the 1950s or something? It was like, this is a temple recommend requirement now. We have this tendency as saints to project everything that we have today onto church history. And then sometimes people get a little disillusioned or a little disappointed when they find out, some things have changed, not doctrinally, but in terms of programs, in terms of the implementation in pretty radical ways. I like that we're talking about that in General Conference. So hey, guess what? Tithing wasn't that big of a thing during a good chunk of our church.
Yeah, I also like that he brought this up and made this distinction. I have an issue with people who always bring up the distinction between policy versus doctrine. I'm like, the line isn't so clear all the time. But I think how he brought it up here, how there are some commandments that are for specific times and places, and there are some that are more permanent, and sometimes they're more or less emphasized. That's not necessarily a bad thing. That's a kind of a normal thing. But the thing I did notice is as soon as you like or follow any Latter-day Saint content online, the algorithms love to serve to you anti-Mormon stuff.
We hear you like stories about Mormonism. You want to listen to Mormon stories?
Yeah, they're like, oh, you watched one General Conference talk? Well, how about 80 anti-Mormon debates and whatever? But, one of those, autoplay videos came up. It was a guy playing this quote from the talks, and he cut it off specifically before he explained and gave examples of the temporary commandments.
Zach, I am shocked to hear that you said an anti-Mormon took a General Conference quote out of context. Are you serious?
Yeah, so he just said that there's permanent doctrine and temporary doctrine or whatever. And then he cuts it off and he's like, I've never heard this. I don't know what this is about. And then he plays a bunch of old clips saying that the commandments are eternal and things like that, which certain commandments are, right? And so he plays a bunch of like old clips and he's like, I guess they're introducing new doctrine. And I was like, well, yeah, but you cut him off right before he explained like very valid examples, such as we all need to go to the Salt Lake Valley. Like, obviously, that's no longer a commandment, but it definitely was back in the day. And the people who followed that commandment were blessed, and the people who didn't, not so much, right? So, like, he explains it perfectly, and there's no way you could misinterpret it. But yeah, that had like tons of views and thousands of interactions of people saying, oh my gosh, the church is just making stuff up now. And I'm like, what are you guys talking about? Like, it's just funny you see stuff like that. And it's funny that they chose this as a point of attack.
I will go back to what you said about policy and doctrine, because I had the exact same thought when he said that. He's another way of saying this is there are things that the Lord commands for policy reasons, and then there are things the Lord commands for doctrinal reasons. It is important, I think, for us to be able to mentally bucket things into those two different categories, right? Because when we get attached to something that's a policy and think it's a doctrine, then we're blindsided when it's changed. Now, what we don't need to do when we're making that distinction for our epistemological understanding is then project that into, I need to obey doctrine, but I don't need to obey policy.
Right. And as he says in the talk, he says, though only temporary, when still in force, these commandments were given to be obeyed.
Yes. I cannot go on a second mission as a young man. As much as I would love to, as much as my desires may be righteous, it would be wrong of me to go pretend I'm someone else, go through the investigator path and serve a second mission. You could technically probably do that deceptively. Don't do it because the Lord expects us to follow the policies. The kitchen area is for warming and serving food, not for cooking. That's not a doctrine, but yes, he will hold us responsible when he gives guidelines to his church.
I think that was in Ezekiel. There's
About
warming only thou shalt.
President Oaks goes on and he says, recent examples of reemphasis have also been needed because of current circumstances faced by Latter-day Saints or the church. These include the proclamation on the family issued by President Gordon B. Hinckley a generation ago, and President Russell M. Nelson's recent call for the church to be known by its revealed name, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And that seems even like it's been hard for some people.
One re-emphasis that I noticed he didn't include, but I feel deserves to be included, is the re-emphasis on the wearing of the temple garment. The reading part that bishops and stake presidents do as part of the temple recommend interview process has been substantially expanded. And we keep getting conference talk after conference talk after conference talk, re-emphasizing this point.
Very true. It's so cool just to see what is being re-emphasized over and over again. Another one, he goes on to his third point. President Oak says, another of our Savior's teachings seems to require re-emphasis in the circumstances of our day. This is a time of many harsh and hurtful words in public communications, and sometimes even in our families. Sharp differences on issues of public policy often results in actions of hostility, even hatred, in public and personal relationships. This atmosphere of enmity sometimes even paralyzes capacities for lawmaking on matters of importance where most citizens see an urgent need for some action in the public interest. What should followers of Christ teach and do in this time of toxic communications? What were his teachings and examples? And then he goes on.
We're recording this right before Election Day. So this is especially timely. I mean, if we could talk about toxic communication, oh my goodness. And I expect that between now and a few weeks from now, however long it takes to get the election results out and any drama resulting from that, it's just going to get worse.
Yeah. And I mean, I think we've all seen it. I think it's become kind of how politics works now is people have lost friends over politics. People have shunned family members over politics, both children and parents. You know, I've never understood like hating someone because of their opinion. These things are very important, but this is one of the more difficult balancing acts that you have to draw. But I think to a certain extent, as he mentions, like basically communications with people you know and love on these topics should never devolve into hatred and vitriol, right? It's just not worth it. But at the same time, there are things happening in the world. You know, I'll just bring up like Drag Story Hour or whatever. I have no interest in like attacking people who like love that. But okay, well, what if it was my library? Or what if it was my preschool or something? Am I allowed to say this is bad? Or is that contention, right? But I don't know if you guys have had similar thoughts or struggles.
Well, President Oak says, this is one of Christ's best known commandments. And then he uses this great phrase, most revolutionary. Boy, I like the word revolutionary. That sounds like a powerful masculine thing I can do, right? Most revolutionary and most difficult to follow.
Yeah.
I've seen so many people take President Nelson's talk on peacemakers, which is kind of the keystone of all this. This is definite reemphasis. We get 2 or 3 talks every conference about being peacemakers, about shedding contention. This is President Oaks, the most straight-talking, sharp-shooting member of the Quorum of the 12, and now in the First Presidency. Obviously, he's not talking about not saying the hard thing that needs to be said. I think too often we conflate conflict and contention. The Lord expects us to stand as witnesses of him at all times, in all things, and in all places. He took a whip, and he overturned tables, and he called the Pharisees hypocrites, and he was out there stirring the pot. Revolutionary is a good word for it. I don't think President Oaks is using that by accident.
Mm-hmm.
And later on, when he talks about avoiding contention, he then adds this clarification. He says, this does not mean to compromise our principles and priorities, but to cease harshly attacking others for theirs. And I linked to President Nelson's Peacemakers Needed talk from April 2023, where, of course, we all felt, guilt, like, ooh, am I doing something wrong by, posting quotes from the Family Proclamation because I'm getting attacked for it? That sure seems contentious, doesn't it? People are telling me it's contentious. I was told not to give a sacrament meeting talk because it was President Oak's talk. They assigned President Oak's talk without reading it. They assigned it to me. I was brand new in the ward. And then they called me a few days before Sunday and said, we're so sorry to change the subject of your talk, but we just read President Oak's talk and it talks about transgender issues and LGBTQ and all this other stuff. And so we're going to change to something else. Yes, we are afraid of offending people. We are afraid of contention. That's good, but we should not be afraid of conflict. President Nelson, in that landmark talk, he said, after basically berating us, right, all of us who are defending that go too strong, very strongly saying, guys, you got to cut it out and you got to get the Spirit with you or you shall not teach, as the Doctrine and Covenant says. He says, I am not talking about peace at any price. Never do the brethren say compromise. Never do the brethren say, sit down and shut up and let people steamroll over you. Mm-hmm. They say, no, we want you active in the discussion. We want you actively doing what we tell you to do in the family proclamation, what we do every election season. This election season, what did they sent out a letter? And it's new. They were telling us you need to fight against abortion. They're asking us to be engaged, but they're asking us to do it the right way.
Christ, when he was supposed to be the Messiah, he was seen as a conqueror, right? But he came as a lamb, right? The lion and the lamb. That is that's the Christian yin yang, basically, And we see that in the Book of Mormon with the anti-Nephi Lehis, who some of them literally knelt before their murderers and were killed. But then their sons probably killed a lot of those type of people, right? And that's the same group of people. It's the same group.
With the same motivation.
Yeah, same motivation, same faith, same righteousness. So are we supposed to be the anti-Nephi Lehis who lay down our lives? Or are we supposed to be the stripling warriors? As a Christian, you have to hold both things. And I think what's happening here is the brethren have seen, and I have as well, if any church post, if you just go and scroll at the comments, you will see outraged members of our own faith attacking the apostles in those comments. Maybe he's addressing those people a bit more than he's addressing me. But at the same time, I'm supposed to say, Lord, is it I? And so when I hear this, I think to a certain extent, re-emphasizing the idea that we should forego harsh and hurtful words in all our communications. I think you can do that and still be an effective defender of the faith. You can still wield the sword of truth. Mm-hmm. And in conference, they're talking to people who are going to listen to this advice. And so in our own communications, maybe you're already a great defender of the faith, but maybe you're not the best peacemaker, and you can work on that part.
And I'm going to get specific. All of my friends on Latter-day Saint Twitter who like to throw around profanities, accuse people of being retarded, and make personal attacks when they disagree with some progressive, quote unquote, member, that's what President Oakes is talking about. He's not saying don't engage on the ideas. He's not trying to emasculate us and turn us into George McFly. He's just telling us to do it right.
I love this discussion, and I think that this is exactly what we need. And President Oakes gives us the blueprint. He says that potential adversaries should begin their discussions by identifying common ground on which all agree.
That's not just about building camaraderie or good feelings, although that's certainly nice. You need clarity whenever you're going to discuss something, especially in a debate setting where you're coming at it from different angles. People are arguing on the leaves, on the periphery issues. And I think that the issue where you diverge from the trunk is much, much farther down. For example, I was having a discussion with a certain very progressive, well-known Latter-day Saint a few years back in support of LGBTQ and all this other stuff that's very contrary to the church on virtually every social issue, abortion, the whole 9 yards. How do you justify that? Explain to me. And so he says, well, because of this and that and the other. I said, okay, but what about this? Oh, well, you and I don't see eye to eye on that. Okay, cool. Let's talk about that. Let's go farther down until eventually you get to the point. It's like, okay, you and I have completely different ideas of the nature of Jesus Christ, the nature of the restoration and the plan of salvation, right? Those core doctrines are where our real disagreements lie. I will grant you the premise that if I had your view of these fundamental doctrines, I would logically arrive at the same positions you hold. You are not, and that's the point when you're talking with someone, they're not illogical, right? They're not idiots that have the same foundation you have and just can't put two and two together. It's always boils down to something more fundamental. And I feel like President Oakes is trying to say, guys, get out of the leaves and get down to the trunk and find out where you actually disagree. because that's where discussion is going to be meaningful.
And that's what's missing from, I think, the social media thing. It's all about like the sound bits and, oh, I'm gonna one up this person. President Oakes talks about how one of the Savior's first commandments to the Nephites was to avoid contention. And it's interesting that he did that because the people who remained, they were righteous enough to not be wiped out during all the destruction during the Savior's death. So they've gathered to the temple. They're probably, there's injured people. There's people are mourning, they're recovering, they're talking about all these things that have happened, these signs, and the Savior appears to them. So I don't think there was a lot of contention at this point. People were probably really banding together because of all that they had lost. But the Savior knew, it's like, hey, I know that you're going to be okay for a couple generations, but then a little bit of contention is going to enter in, and you guys are going to start fighting over points of doctrine, which is a good thing to be talking about, but avoid this contention. And he saw that's what was coming in the future. And so I think that, that's the point. When we're getting these reemphasis, it might not even be something that we're currently doing, but it's like, hey, this is going to be a problem further down the line.
I think we often look at that time where the Nephites, immediately following Christ's visit is like, oh, that's a city of unique experience. Everyone's united. Yes, but what did Jesus do? Just a short while after he appeared to them, he had to come back again, and the apostles were praying about the name of the church. Why? Because there were disputations. He's like, I told you guys for 40 days, don't fight, no disputations on my points of doctrine. I've only been gone a few weeks or months, and you guys are fighting about the name of my church.
Contention is not only destructive of your enemy, if you're good at it, right? But it's self-destructive. You don't feel better when you win an online argument. You don't feel enlightened. You don't feel closer to Christ. And honestly, that should be your first clue.
What do they tell you on the mission? When you get in a bash, the person who wins is Satan.
Right. And I do think there are ways of passionately defending the gospel, right, without getting to a place where you hate the other person. I've gotten into discussions online, maybe I'll admit to that, but I never hated them. And to a certain, sometimes
here's a question. You said you never hated them. Do you think that they ever hated you? And if they hated you, even if you didn't hate them, is that contention? This is your question, because I feel many members are wrestling with this.
It's a good question. Yeah, is it contention if the other guy's just seething and you're just having fun? I don't know. It probably is, but
I would say the whole idea of provocation is misunderstood. Elder Bednar hits on this very hard. He says, no one can offend you. That is an error in our language that negates agency. You and I choose to take offense. We are objects to act, not to be acted upon. Our responsibility, I would say, this is gospel according to Matthew Watkins, not even the Matthew, just gospel according to me. We are responsible for how we perform in an argument. If someone chooses to take offense and get contentious, that is not on us if we have done everything we can to talk about ideas, never attacking people, to make sure that we always do so respectfully. Look, the point is, you tell the truth, you're going to upset people. Again, another error in our language. People are going to choose to get upset. We can't control that. And I feel like many Latter-day Saints in a devotion to niceness culture, and I feel many of them I take my niceness culture idea and I see all these talks on contention, that just validates that I should just never involve myself in any discussion.
Yeah, I think people are too apt to adopt the principle of non-action in whenever they're like, you can preach the gospel without even saying a word. They're like, well, I'm never saying a word.
I can do that.
A word.
One of my friends, Bob Deduck is his handle, a man I really admire. And he's really good at discussion. He's really smart. And he was responding to a troubling post by a very well-known member of the church. And he started with, hey, I like you. What are you talking about? On what planet do you get this idea? And I thought that's a great way to start. And that's a great position to be in. And so I think about example, and definitely everyone should follow Bob Deduck, and he's the author of the Duck Stack on Substack. But as I was saying, you look at these examples from the Book of Mormon and Jacob, people come to hear him preach, and he's like, hey, I'm going to say some stuff and it's going to hurt some feelings. I don't want to do it, but I've got to do it. This is, what we have to do. So he was really cautious about that and trying to do it so in a sensitive manner. And then you look at Nephi and at the end of Helaman, and he's at his house praying, and these people come to him. And he's like, "What are you guys doing?" He's like, "Why'd you guys come?" They're like, "All right, if you guys are here, I'm going to keep doing it." And then they come to almost attack him. He's like, "Okay, fine. I'm going to show you guys what being a prophet's all about." And so it's interesting, like how that works sometimes.
The best time to hear these guys speak is when you're a missionary, because they drop all the courtesy. It's all gone. Elder Idokaitis is great. He came to our mission and he said, "Okay, what do you guys do great on your mission? What are you guys the best at?" Well, one of my buddies was a zone leader, and he stands up and he's like, "Oh, I'm going to answer this." And he goes, "I think we're really good at, opening our mouth in Spanish, abrir la boca. We're great at contacting people. We talk to everyone on our mission." And he's like, "Oh, that's great. How did you come here today?" He's like, "Oh, I took a bus." And he's like, "Was it 1 or 2 buses?" And he's like, "It was 2. And how many people on each bus?" It was rush hour. There's probably a lot of people on there, this morning, like 9 a.m. And he's like, "Well, probably like 30 to 40 people on each bus." And he goes, "And how many did you talk to about the gospel?" And the guy was like, "None." And he points his long finger at him. He's got really long fingers. He points it at him and he goes, "You failed."
Oh, man.
I think there are times and places where you can be more direct, and there are times and places where you need to be more diplomatic. And I think the apostles do it great. But that's also anyone thinking about going on mission, do it just so you can see how they talk.
I know we're getting close to time here, but I want to touch on "Come Follow Me" as well. And that's what President Oaks begins talking about is how inspiring this curriculum is. A friend shared this today, and he said, "Sitting in Sunday school, learning about how Mormons' epic of massacre and revenge and cannibalism is actually about how we're all enough." It's so funny. And I think that's one of the things that is requiring that reemphasis is that we never need to water down the doctrine. And just because we have a more loose study guide, to call it, for the scriptures, I mean, we have to be immersing ourselves in the Book of Mormon every day.
Amen to that.
Amen.
Well, awesome. This was great, guys. And to all of our listeners, thank you. Thank you for listening to the Conference Talk podcast. This episode, we discuss following Christ, which was President Dallin H. Oaks' address from this most recent General Conference.
If you enjoyed this episode, give us a 5-star rating anywhere you get your podcasts.
And check out our website, conferencetalk.org, where you can follow us on social media, drop a comment. Just make sure it's not contentious. Check out the show notes and learn more about us, your hosts.
If you want to follow me non-contentiously, you can find me at powerinthebook.com.
And you can find me at Brett W. Kane on X. And Zach?
Yeah, check me out. My Twitter is Shaolin AI. I run a coding boot camp.
But while we always appreciate new followers, it's better to follow the prophets and apostles themselves.
Yep, we love speaking about the church and our leaders, but we do not speak for them. Everything said on this podcast represents our own personal opinions, zero contention.
So join us next time in making Conference Weekend every weekend on the Conference Talk podcast.